Hello friends! So for the last few years, Amazon Games and Embracer Group have been working on a brand new MMO set in the Lord of the Rings universe, and now it looks like that project has been scrapped. This was originally announced back in 2023 as an open world MMO for PC and consoles, and was being led by Amazon Games Orange County, which is the same studio behind New World. But recently Eurogamer reported that multiple sources familiar with the studio were saying that the MMO project had been cancelled. So they reached out to Amazon for a comment, and Amazon's head of games basically confirmed that the project, at least in its MMO form, is no longer happening. The official statement was that their creative team is still exploring a compelling new game experience that does justice to Tolkien's world, and that they're working closely with Middle-earth and remain excited about the IP. Which is a very confusing statement. Yeah, I know. But from what I can tell, it sounds like the team is no longer pursuing the MMO idea specifically. They still seem interested in the Lord of the Rings IP, but they might be looking for a different direction to pivot the project into. And honestly, that makes sense to me for a couple of reasons. First, Lord of the Rings is a massive IP. I really doubt Amazon would just walk away from it completely because one internal project didn't meet expectations. And second, considering Amazon recently shut down New World, maybe they realized once again that making a successful MMO is incredibly difficult. Not just difficult creatively, but also extremely expensive to build, support and maintain. Plus, we never really got many details about this project in the first place. And the fact that Amazon didn't answer the cancellation question directly makes me think that this is probably the most likely explanation. That said, this might actually be a good thing, because let's be honest, studios have been trying to make successful MMOs for decades, and only a small number of them have managed to become truly commercially successful. So maybe a smarter move here is to drop the multiplayer heavy MMO angle and turn this into a premium single player game instead. A focused action RPG, narrative RPG, or even a co-op adventure could still make a great use of the Lord of the Rings world, characters and atmosphere, without all that pressure that comes with live service systems, specifically server infrastructure, retention goals, and constant content updates. And since Amazon already partnered with Embracer on this, and Embracer has a huge portfolio of successful single-player games, maybe handing the ball to them would actually improve the chances of this game turning out well. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed that another Lord of the Rings project has been cancelled, but at the same time this could end up being a blessing in disguise. At least that's how I see it. What do you think? After Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster came out, it kinda felt like the franchise was done again, but now, maybe not. According to Capcom's latest financial report, the publisher still considers Dead Rising one of its leading brands. This report says that the franchise has now sold 19 million units in total, and Capcom didn't just mention Dead Rising. They also brought up other major brands that don't always get the same spotlight as Resident Evil, like Mega Man, Devil May Cry, and Ace Attorney. More specifically, Capcom said that these leading brands are going to be the next engine of growth, and that could potentially mean new IPs, sequels, remakes, ports, and a lot of other things. Now, unfortunately, the financial report didn't include any specific title announcements. So yeah, we don't really have Dead Rising 5 or anything like that confirmed. But it does sound like something could be coming eventually. The big takeaway here is that even though Resident Evil, Monster Hunter and Street Fighter are clearly the main stars of Capcom's lineup, the company still seems interested in investing more into its other franchises. And to be fair, Capcom already started doing that with Dead Rising in 2024 with Deluxe Remaster. It wasn't some massive earth-shattering release, but it did help repair the IP a little bit after the disastrous launches of Dead Rising 3 and Dead Rising 4. And honestly, I think Dead Rising doesn't really need to become as big as Resident Evil to justify more investment. It just needs to show that there is still a real audience there. It needs to prove that people will buy these games consistently enough for Capcom to keep the franchise around. A good sequel or maybe even a full franchise reset could be the way to do that. My guess is that Capcom will keep experimenting with Dead Rising, but it probably won't take any huge risks right away. What seems more likely is that the company will use existing assets and Resident Evil engine production pipelines to make more remakes and remasters first. That way they can test demand without spending a ridiculous amount of money, and only after that, if the numbers look good, maybe they start betting on bigger projects again. But now, at least Dead Rising isn't dead. And honestly, that's good enough for me, as I've been dying to play more Dead Rising games. So, after Ubisoft acknowledged that Assassin's Creed Hexe is the next big thing for the franchise, a big batch of leaked information showed up online. And one of the more surprising claims is that the game might bring back probably the most famous assassin in the entire series, Ezio Auditore. The leak was posted on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, and it comes from a notable leaker named Rogue, and there is quite a lot in there. For starters, the protagonist is supposedly named Anika, and she is apparently a descendant of Claudia Auditore. Because of that connection, Ezio is supposedly going to return at least in some form. Maybe he appears in person, maybe through some Isu artifact, or maybe through flashbacks. The leak also claims that the story is better than the one in Origins, which would be definitely encouraging if it's true. And apparently the world is going to have a lot of forests, and there will be an unlockable skill for jumping from tree branch to tree branch. But then again, this is all leaked and unconfirmed information, so take every part of it with a huge grain of salt. Now, if this is true, bringing back Ezio could be a smart move in one very obvious way. He is very recognizable, every hardcore Assassin's Creed fan knows him, and longtime players have a lot of nostalgia for him. From a marketing perspective, he gives Ubisoft a very simple hook, and connects back to the most familiar and beloved era of the franchise. But at the same time, it kind of feels a little cheap and honestly a little confusing. Hexe was originally presented as something fresher, darker, and more unusual than just one more Assassin's Creed, and Ezio is basically the safest legacy character Ubisoft could possibly use. So what it makes me feel is that Ubisoft might not be fully confident in this new game standing on its own. Like, they need to bring back a long-gone character, insert him into the story somehow, and use him to make the game feel more relevant. Because let's face it, there is nothing fresh about Ezio at this point. And I don't mean that as an insult to the character, he's iconic for a reason. But if the goal is to make Hexe feel new, then relying on Ezio feels like the opposite of that. And honestly, it's a little sad to see, but also, what else is new, right? Still, we don't actually know much about Hexe yet, so maybe there is a good reason for his return, and maybe it will make sense in the context. So for now, we probably need to wait for more information before drawing any final conclusions. After EA remade Dead Space a few years ago, it looks like the franchise got put back on ice. And apparently the reason might be pretty simple. Dead Space cannot be turned into a live service game. Now, all that comes from a recently spotted podcast episode with Chuck Beaver, who was a former writer and producer on the series. And according to him, it is unlikely that EA is going to invest in Dead Space again anytime soon, because the numbers just aren't there. He said EA and other big companies are mostly looking for the next Fortnite now. They want a massive money maker. And in that environment, a single player game with no live service component can start to look like an outdated business model, like a big smelly fossil. According to Beaver, for these kinds of games to even have a chance at getting a sequel, they need to sell over 10 million copies. And that is extremely difficult even for a breakout success, especially in the horror genre. He also said that back in the day, Dead Space needed to hit around 5 million units to keep going. But with rising production costs, that number eventually shot up to something closer to 15 million. And when you consider that even a great remake of the original Dead Space failed to meet EA's internal expectations, this franchise could be stuck in a limbo permanently. And on one hand, all of this lines up with where EA's business is right now, especially since the company reported 8 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2026. Out of that, 5.3 million came from live services, while only 2.1 billion came from full games. But let's stop and do some quick math here. A typical AAA game costs around $60 to $70 US, right? So if we say 60 times 15 million copies, that's almost $1 billion. And if the typical AAA budget is somewhere around $300 million, assuming we're not talking about GTA level spending of course, then what they're basically saying is that a game needs to make at least triple its budget to be considered worth continuing. And don't get me wrong, I understand that profits matter, but triple? Really? Isn't that a little steep? And that's before we even start talking about everything else that affects the actual money coming in. Also, let's not forget how many live service games have failed over the last couple of years, and the fact how hard it is to make a successful live service game, arguably harder than making a good premium single player game. And yet big publishers would still rather gamble hundreds of millions of dollars trying to create the next Fortnite than make a solid premium game based on IP people already know, just because that premium game might not triple the money. Is it just me, or does that not make sense to you either? Meanwhile, the troubled Subnautica 2 finally launched in early access, and it didn't just launch, it launched with a splash. According to recent reports, this underwater survival adventure sold more than 2 million copies in just one day and attracted almost 500,000 concurrent players. The overall sentiment seems to be pretty good too. Steam reviews are very positive and most outlets seems to agree that yes, this is still an early access game, but Unknown Worlds has done a pretty impressive job with that sequel so far. The developers also shared a big roadmap showing what's coming next, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised things are going this well. Mostly because of all the controversy surrounding the publisher. I mean, Krafton removed its name from the Steam page, but it was also the company that fired the leadership team at Unknown Worlds. That team then went to court and was reinstated a few months ago, sure, but all in all there was a lot of drama around this game. But it looks like even a major dispute like that didn't stop the rest of the development team from delivering great results. And it also looks like most players decided not to punish the game itself for the issues with its parent company. And all that is definitely a big win for Unknown Worlds. It also suggests they've figured out a strong path for making a successful survival game. But launching big is one thing, maintaining that momentum is something else entirely. Now they have a huge number of players to satisfy. They still need to produce more content, more systems, and more reasons for people to keep coming back. And they need to do all of that before those players get bored of what's already available. So yeah, the launch is definitely impressive. Now we'll see how well they can navigate these waters over the next few months. Also, quick thing, if you don't know who I am, my name is Alex, I'm a game producer and I'm here to help you get caught up on everything that's going on in the video game industry. Last week we talked about Arena Breakout preparing to launch a brand new PvE mode, and now another extraction shooter is planning to do the same thing, Marathon from Bungie. The development team recently posted a big update on X, where they talked about how the launch went, what worked, what didn't, and what they're planning as they get ready for Season 2 on June 2nd. And it looks like Bungie has also realized something important. In extraction shooters, PvE matters too. So they're going to experiment with two new modes. One will arrive at the beginning of the season, and the other will come around the middle or toward the end. The first experimental mode will focus more on PvE, but still include a light touch of PvP. The second mode will be fully PvE. That one will focus on crews completing objectives together and making progress across multiple matches. While these experiments are running, Bungie will evaluate both modes, and there is a chance they could eventually become part of the core game loop, or even permanent new game modes. And honestly, that's probably a smart move. I'm sure Bungie has realized by now that PvP is great for attracting hardcore shooter players, but for everyone else, it can become overwhelming really fast. New players can run into a skill barrier, they might not have time, and might not have a reliable group to play with. And when all of those things stack on top of each other, a lot of players are just going to leave. A solid PvE mode could help fix that problem. Of course, it doesn't automatically save the game. The mode has to be rewarding enough that people actually care about playing it, but it can be so rewarding that it pulls too many players away from the core extraction mode. And that's a tricky balance. So Bungie's long-term challenge is going to be figuring out how to add PvE without turning Marathon into a less focused version of a co-op loot shooter. But hey, this is Bungie, the people who made Destiny 2, so it probably shouldn't be that hard for them, right? Either way, it will be interesting to see who handles it better, Bungie with Marathon or more fun studios with Arena Breakout Infinite. And that's all I have for you guys so far. Let me know what do you think about the cancelled Lord of the Rings MMO. What are your thoughts on Dead Rising potentially making a return? And if you're playing Subnautica 2. As usual, if you want to know more, all links are down below. And of course, clicking the like button helps this channel a lot and I personally highly appreciate it. Thank you for making it this far, and with that, Alex is signing off for today. Cheers!